I would like to approach alternative dispute resolution from a very practical perspective. But I will start with the Constitution because that is the mother of all laws. And the Constitution provides in Article 159 to C that courts and tribunals shall be guided by the following principles. Then it talks about alternative forms of dispute resolution, including reconciliation, mediation, arbitration, and traditional dispute resolution mechanisms. That is very important so that what we are discussing can have some anchorage in law. Now, I would also like to go very quickly through some of the disputes which could arise in property matters. For example, a rent dispute between a landlord and a tenant. I think that is the most obvious. But there are other types of disputes which could arise and do arise in the property sector. For example, nuisance between two tenants. One is accusing the other one of being a nuisance, playing loud music, hosting loud or very numerous parties, that kind of thing. Or other disputes between tenants in a block of flats or in an office block. It could be about parking, it could be about other things. Think of a dispute about the level of service charge. Tenants, when they are signing leases, do not usually interrogate the service charge content very deeply. But later on, they raise issues. Why should I pay for insurance of the building? Why should I pay for this and the other? Why should I pay for the lift? The lift does not belong to me. It belongs to the landlord. When I vacate the building, I will leave the landlord to him. So those are some of the issues which arise. Or take, for example, a boundary dispute between two parcels of land in Voi, in Taveta, in Makueni, in Githuguri, in Kakamega, just a boundary dispute between two property owners. You know how emotive such disputes can be. A Kenyan can kill another Kenyan because of 2 inches of soil at the boundary, where not even an onion can grow. But they fight, they spend money, they engage lawyers and all. The last example I'll give about property disputes is it's related to property sales. Because people could have entered into agreements for property sales in February this year, January, February, March. Then come COVID-19. When they negotiated the terms of the contract, including the price, they had certain assumptions about the level of occupancy, the level of rent achievable, and all that. Now the ball game has changed completely. Even in terms of mortgages, the ball game has changed completely. So what happens in such a case? Somebody has paid 40, 50% deposit. What happens? Should they be required to forfeit the 10% deposit? I'm happy that we have Christine Kipsang in this panel, and that what she'll be talking about is unforeseeable circumstances, which in law are given a very fancy Latin name. I'll be happy to hear the interpretation of the Latin into English and to see how it affects property transaction. So in terms of property sales, what I'm saying is, has the ground shifted so much because of COVID-19 that there should be room for renegotiation of the terms, including the price. That takes me to the other issue, which is the topics of negotiation, what would the parties be negotiating about? When people talk of negotiations between property owners, they think automatically about rent reduction. That is all we are hearing about in the media. Rent reduction or rent waiver. I don't want to pay rent because I have been fired, or I can't pay the full rent because I'm now on half pay. Now, yet looking at rent purely and nothing else is looking at the situation uh, too simplistically, in my view. There are many issues that need to be looked at in negotiations with respect to landlord and tenancy issues. Of course, the rent level is important, but there's the rent escalation clause. Now, in Kenya, the tradition is that when a tenant is signing a lease, they commit themselves to a certain percent of rent increase every year. Again, they enter into that with some presumptions. And the landlords plan their lives on the basis of those escalation clauses. So they cannot be dismissed or negotiated just like that. There are very serious consequences, both for landlords and for tenants. Consider also the service charge. Some tenants are working from home, so they are not actually utilizing the services in some of the buildings. But that notwithstanding, the landlord is incurring expenses. And those expenses have not changed in any way because of COVID-19. The presidential directive, unfortunately, has not covered the expenses. The expenses are still hitting landlords. So how can service charge provisions be negotiated so that they are workable both for landlords and for tenants? Now, another area is even the reduction in rent in the cases where landlords are agreeable to such reductions. Are they pure complete reductions, or is the balance put in a debt account so that it accumulates as a debt to be recovered later when the economy improves? So all those are things that should be negotiated, but also including reduction of space. An organization took 10,000 square feet because it had so many members of staff. Now all the staff are working from home, so the landlord, the tenant does not need all that space. Should tenants renegotiate the space that they occupy? And then, of course, even the termination, the premature termination of leases, should it be on the table, and on what terms? Because landlords plan their lives on the basis of the leases. Leases are binding contracts, and landlords are entitled to plan their lives and their finances and their mortgages, depending on what is in those provisions. So it's not good enough just to say, for a tenant to say, I no longer need an office, I should be released. There are, if such clauses are to be negotiated, it's on certain conditions. So now I'll go very quickly to the alternative dispute resolution. What is it? Alternative dispute resolution, very simply, is methods used for resolving disputes out of court. But I like adding something there. Methods used for resolving disputes out of court without violence or breaching the law. So even as we try to resolve disputes out of court, we must stay clear of breaking the law, we should stay clear also of causing violence. Now, I'll go quickly to the methods of dispute resolution without going to much detail, and I'll concentrate on the amicable methods of resolving disputes. They are called amicable because the parties are engaged directly into seeking a solution and there is no coercion. The first method is negotiation. Negotiation happens all the time. Like now, if I need to borrow 20 minutes from Christine for my presentation, I could send a text message to her now and ask her, Christine, I'm running out of time. Will you donate 20 minutes of your time? And she's, she might agree. You might find her agreeing for some reason. And I would be very happy. So all I'm saying is that people are negotiating all the time. And even tenants and landlords, because of the situations they are in now, should not consider the lease as having been given by God. They negotiated the lease. They can also renegotiate some of the terms of the lease so that they can, so that it's practical to proceed. Now, the other method is mediation. Mediation is like a negotiation, only that there is a third party to facilitate to facilitate discussion. Because the first casualty in a dispute is communication. People are unable to communicate. And what the mediator does is to facilitate that communication.